anglais. Je crois qu'on peut démarrer. Bonjour mesdames et messieurs, merci de votre présence. Quand on a imaginé ce sujet de conférence, les défis du commerce international et du commerce digital, du e-commerce, en fait, on n'avait pas vraiment pensé à l'actualité, mais l'actualité nous a d'une part rattrapé et d'autre part devancé un peu. Il y en a une qui était prévisible. Il y a une activité sur l'e-commerce, soyons clairs au sens très large, c'est Noël. Voilà, donc c'est une période de l'année de e-commerce intense. Je ne sais pas si nous intervenons pour nous le confirmer. C'est des variations fortes au cours de l'année, même si ce n'est pas tout à fait le sujet. L'autre sujet qui nous a évidemment rattrapé, c'est la décision, enfin la nouvelle qui est tombée en début de semaine sur le blocage au fond de l'Organisation mondiale du commerce qui, n'ayant plus qu'un seul juge, l'organe d'appel n'ayant plus qu'un seul juge en place, se trouve dans une situation tout à fait particulière et difficile. Et ce sera aujourd'hui évidemment l'occasion aussi de discuter de l'impact de ce blocage de l'Organisation mondiale du commerce sur le commerce international en général et évidemment aussi sur les règles ou l'absence de règles dans le domaine du e-commerce. Alors, j'ai le plaisir d'accueillir aujourd'hui 3 intervenants de la Genève internationale, d'organisations importantes et bien connues. Alors, je commencerai par Monsieur Torbjorn Fredriksson, qui est coordinateur du rapport sur l'économie digitale et chef de la section sur les politiques concernant les technologies de l'information et de la communication. Tout cela à la CNUSED. Voilà, merci Monsieur Fredriksson. Madame Marion Jansen, elle est directrice de la division du développement des marchés et économiste en chef au Centre du commerce international. Enfin, Monsieur Crispin Conroy, qui est observateur permanent de la Chambre de commerce internationale. Donc, vous êtes très impliqués dans cette dimension du commerce international, j'ai vu que vous connaissiez d'ailleurs, donc vous avez affaire à vous, enfin entre vous, ce sont des organismes qui se complètent. Vous allez d'ailleurs nous expliquer un peu les différents angles les différents angles d'approche de cette thématique du commerce selon les caractéristiques des institutions international auquel vous assistez. Alors pour le dérouler, on va d'abord avoir une petite introduction de chacun des speakers de 7-8 minutes, puis on passera à une discussion que je mènerai au début, notamment sur la question justement de la question liée à l'OMC. Et puis ensuite, c'est à vous évidemment qu'il appartiendra de poser vos questions pour une fin de séance tout à fait ouverte. Alors, je vais commencer par donner la parole à M. Fredriksson. Chacun s'exprime dans sa langue. Je crois que nous avons 2 interventions en anglais, une en français, comme ça l'équilibre est plus ou moins respecté. Chacun s'exprime dans sa langue. M. Fredriksson, la division de la CNUSED vient de sortir aussi un rapport très intéressant sur le e-commerce, qui fait un peu l'état des lieux de l'intensité du e-commerce par région, par pays. Il va aussi nous donner un petit peu un aperçu de cela, ainsi que sa vision plus large du e-commerce. Alors, merci d'abord à tous les 3 de votre présence, et puis je passe directement la parole à M. Fredriksson.
Merci beaucoup. Et puis, je vais commencer en anglais. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for this opportunity to present some of our reflections on what's happening in the area of e-commerce. When we talk about e-commerce from UNCATD, we really take the development perspective of e-commerce, and I would say that today Geneva is the global center on discussions related to e-commerce and the development, so to understand how it all plays out for developing countries. And I think we can see e-commerce today as not only related to trade, which will be the topic of our discussions mainly today, but really as an illustration of the whole digital transformation that is happening right now to basically all sectors, all value chains, and so on. We're seeing that this rapid uptake of various digital technologies is disrupting existing industries and business models, and therefore will have major implications also for international trade. Let me give you some numbers to start with, just to have a magnitude. We estimate that global e-commerce is about $29 trillion, of which 4 trillion is what we refer to as business-to-consumer e-commerce. Cross-border e-commerce, which is the trade angle of it, is still a small part, but growing faster than domestic e-commerce. We know that about 1.3 billion people are buying online today in the world. So that's basically 1/4 of the adult population in the world, with almost about 280 million people buying across borders. We can also see the impact on trade that ICT services, selling services that are like software and various ICT services, are growing much faster than overall services trade. And we also see very rapid growth of trade in services that can be delivered digitally as well. But we also see that there are huge divides when it comes to e-commerce in the world. It's a very particular aspect of the digital divide, you could say. And here in Switzerland, for example, about 70% of people are already buying online. If you go to Africa, for instance, you rarely see a share of the population of more than 5%. And in many countries, it's like 1 or 2% of the population that are buying online. And in no country in Africa, it exceeds 15% of the population. And as was mentioned by a moderator, the 2019 edition of the B2C e-commerce index was released last week here in Geneva. And I understand that the Swiss Press Club is interested in this because Switzerland, sorry, that's a Freudian slip of the tongue, I'm Swedish, or wishful thinking. Switzerland actually ranks number 2 in the global list, right after the Netherlands. And we include about 150 countries. If you then look at the other end of this spectrum, you see that most 18 out of the 20 lowest ranked countries, they are all least developed countries. And 9 out of the 10 lowest ranked countries, they are African countries south of the Sahara. But nevertheless, although we have these big differences in readiness to participate in e-commerce, we see that it's growing everywhere, but of course from different levels. Mainly because people and businesses increasingly see the value of being able to transact online. And for consumers, it's a lot more convenient in many cases because you can choose when you buy, how you buy, from whom, and without having to leave your home or office. So if we think about this, if more and more buyers, whether they are individuals or whether they are businesses, are looking for their goods and services that they want to buy, if they're looking for them online, the sellers need to be there, otherwise they are invisible. And that is one of the concerns that many smaller businesses in developing countries are facing now. They need to be able to be visible in the market. E-commerce, of course, also offers fantastic opportunities for small businesses to reach new markets, to be able to perhaps evade some intermediaries and reach directly this end client. But it also involves a lot of challenges, such as increased competition, disruption of existing industries and business models, challenges related to taxation, a need for different skill sets, and a need for adapting legal and regulatory frameworks to make sure that e-commerce doesn't just lead to e-commerce, but also some development gains for the countries. For example, in e-commerce, there is a need for consumer protection online, and there's a need for data protection and privacy. We all know the concerns of how data are being used online in different ways. And if you again look at Africa here, currently less than half of the African countries have data protection legislation. Less than half have consumer protection for online sales. In fact, we estimate that around 400 million of all the Facebook users of the world are living in countries with no data protection. But of course, they are still participating actively in the Facebook digital platforms. Very important also, and maybe I'll end here, it's so important to distinguish here between the users and the consumption related to e-commerce and the digital economy, and start looking at the production side and value creation online. And here, while in our index, we see that 8 out of the 10 top performers are European economies. And the non-European ones are Singapore and Australia. When you look at where the value is created online right now, it's not these countries that are dominating the scene. It is the United States and China. In fact, if you look at the 70 largest digital platforms and look at the value of those platforms, market value, then the US and China account for 90%, 90%. And Europe's share there is only 3.6%. So it really gives another perspective on how the digital economy is evolving and who is actually the big beneficiaries right now in this area. I think I'll stop there, and I'll be happy to come back on further on. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fredriksson. So I give the floor now to Mr. Conroy. You are the permanent observer of the International Chamber of Commerce of the United Nations Office of Geneva. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Pierre. Excusez-moi, moi aussi je vais parler en anglais. Je comprends le français assez bien, donc si il y a quelques questions, vous pouvez bien sûr les poser en français, mais je vais répondre en anglais. I'd like to just start to give a bit of context, because sometimes people are not aware of the International Chamber of Commerce, the ICC. There are a number of different ICCs around, whether it's the International Criminal Court or the International Cricket Council, if you're from one of the countries that play cricket, like I am. ICC is the global business organization. We have 45 million member companies across 90 countries in all regions and covering over 1 billion workers. We represent micro, small, medium and large size companies across the globe. It's our centenary year. We were established in Paris at the same time as the Paris Peace Conferences were happening in 1919. At that stage, obviously there was a significant global challenges in the aftermath of the First World War, and business leaders got together to address those challenges at the same time as politicians were addressing them. Fast forward 100 years on, we see that a business has a similar mandate and role to play. Even though we're not in the aftermath of a significant conflict, we do have some significant global challenges, whether we're talking about climate change or mass biodiversity loss, inequality, financing the SDGs, human rights in business, or trade matters like e-commerce. So we're not a traditional business chamber in the sense we bring people together to do business, but we're rather a chamber that brings businesses together to discuss international policy and how we can influence that policy. The ICC opened their office in Geneva a year ago, so it's almost to the day, and I lead that office. The reason why ICC determined that we should have a presence in Geneva was basically because we feel that the multilateral system needs support. It's under quite a bit of pressure, whether it's the UN system and the response obviously being the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs, which are about not just facing global challenges, but also about reform. And SDG 17 focuses on partnerships, particularly with the private sector. But also the WTO, as Pierre mentioned in his introduction, is under major pressure, most recently with the appellate body ceasing to function with the exception of one current case. But we also see there are very positive developments, and business needs to support those developments. For us, the international trading system represented with the WTO is incredibly important for business. The need for certainty, for predictability, and rules that reflect the current global needs of business are extremely important. So while there may be challenges like the appellate body ceasing to function, certainly within the organisation we see issues where there are real progress. And one of those is the Joint Statement Initiative on e-commerce. I participated yesterday in another event on one of the other JSIs, which was around investment facilitation for development, And also there's some really positive issues there. Also in another one of the JSIs on services domestic regulation. That, Pierre, if there are any questions when we want to talk about the WTO more. But in the lead up to MC12, the ministerial conference next year in Kazakhstan, we're taking the business community, particularly small business, by storm. And it's fundamentally altered the way that we conduct business and has ushered in a new age whereby the smallest businesses can go global from day one. Digital technology in particular is enabling small business to minimize their costs, to increase business efficiency and to widen their market reach from their local town or village to trading internationally. Whether trading through their own website, online platform, or through a variety of different interfaces and selling channels, small firms are embracing digital trade and contributing to that competitive, seamless, and convenient shopping experience which consumers increasingly expect in today's economy. However, alongside these positive developments, there has been a race to regulate the different aspects of digital trade across the globe. From the protection of personal data, cybersecurity, intellectual property, to the relationship between online platforms and business users. The race to regulate has profound challenges for small firms trying to operate internationally, largely due to the different approaches adopted. For example, how China approaches digital trade is very different to the United States, and the European Union is equally different from the United States and China, especially in the treatment of cross-border data flows. Consequently, small firms operating internationally have to contend with a multitude of barriers impacting trade and also work with a patchwork of rules. This is problematic for small firms as they are less resilient to regulatory changes, whereas bigger companies can usually manage such changes. Smaller firms have fewer resources to adapt, they are less able to absorb the costs of new administrative and regulatory arrangements, and they cannot spread the costs of obtaining information and acquiring knowledge about compliance across a larger cost base. Therefore, restrictions placed on market access or on operations of cloud computing services or postal services can drive up costs for small business users. It's clear that the status quo is not optimal for small businesses engaged in cross-border digital trade, especially when the growing stock and possible incompatibility of regulations and administrative burdens and trade barriers emerging in different countries around the world. There's a very interesting recent report by the UK Federation of Small Business that has demonstrated how different data protection requirements, data localization measures, and unequal or unclear application of local rules are a clear impediment for small firms engaged in cross-border trade. We have to remember that small and particularly micro businesses do not have a dedicated in-house legal team, nor do they have a dedicated export manager. They generally trade based on ease and cost. So this is one of the reasons why we're particularly keen to support the joint statement initiative in the WTO on e-commerce, as it provides, we believe, a unique opportunity to improve the cross-border digital trade environment for small firms across the globe. We're also particularly pleased that recently, actually last week, there was the moratorium on customs duties on electronic transmissions was extended by the WTO General Council. This moratorium has played a very important role in development of the internet by keeping tariffs off digitally produced products and services and content. So that's been extended to MC12, and we're certainly hoping that it'll be extended permanently. So that's a little bit of background about ICC and why we're interested in the JSI in the WTO on e-commerce. I'm also happy to talk a little bit more about our role on our work on MSMEs in general, if people are interested during questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now we go to Marion Jansen, en français cette fois. Gardez la langue française pour la dernière intervention. Je vous remercie de faire l'effort. Madame Jansen, vous êtes directrice de la division du développement des marchés et économiste en chef au Centre du commerce international. Vous vous préoccupez aussi de PME, de petites et moyennes entreprises en particulier. Et puis, en parcourant votre long CV, j'ai vu que vous aviez passé plusieurs années à l'OMC notamment, je crois, à la division des statistiques. Donc, vous êtes une experte de ces questions de l'OMC, de son fonctionnement. Et ça nous permettra de... Comme d'ailleurs les autres intervenants ont tous aussi des rapports étroits avec l'OMC. Donc, je crois que vous allez aussi l'évoquer en passant dans votre introduction, mais je vous laisse la parole. Merci.
Merci d'inviter le Centre de commerce international et j'aimerais commencer par dire que la langue française n'est pas ma langue. Mais je suis ravie de parler dans la langue de Molière. Je vais faire l'effort. Je vais peut-être devoir passer à l'anglais, la langue de travail au quotidien. J'ai pas seulement travaillé à l'OMC, l'organisation pour laquelle je travaille maintenant, le CCI, a un lien parental avec l'OMC et avec la CNUSET. Nous sommes une des 3 organisations à Genève qui s'occupent du commerce international et la CNUSET et l'OMC ensemble sont nos parents. C'est ce qui se reflète dans la structure de financement du CCI, ce qui rend notre travail spécifique par rapport aux autres organisations, que nous avons le mandat explicite de travailler avec le secteur privé et pour le secteur privé pour permettre aux entreprises de tirer avantage de l'ouverture des marchés. Par défaut, la plupart de notre travail est avec des PME. Les grandes entreprises n'ont souvent pas besoin de notre soutien et notre travail se focalise beaucoup sur les marchés en voie de développement ou émergents. Le thème du changement technologique et de la digitalisation est un thème qui est très important pour les PME. Nous avons, à cause de cela, dédié notre rapport sur les perspectives de la compétitivité des PME en 2018 au thème de l'ère numérique, de la digitalisation, parce que nous pensons que ce sera vraiment un des grands défis de l'avenir pour les PME partout. Ce thème est un peu plus large que le thème du commerce électronique. Il y a des questions comme la robotique avancée, l'impression en 3 dimensions, et les big data, le rôle des mégadonnées pour les petites entreprises. Et souvent, on voit déjà dans le nom big data, small companies, on voit déjà qu'il y a des tensions. Nous avons, à part de ce rapport en 2018, nous avons du travail régulier sur le thème commerce électronique et nous avons publié plusieurs études à cet égard, toujours avec un focus sur les PME et notamment une publication en français qui s'appelle « De nouvelles pistes vers le commerce électronique, une enquête mondiale sur la compétitivité des PME ». Dans cette publication-là, et je trouve même toujours que c'est très commode pour comprendre le commerce électronique pour les PME, nous avons analysé le commerce électronique à travers le processus qu'une PME doit suivre pour vendre online. Alors, le premier défi est d'aller online et de présenter son entreprise et ses produits sur l'Internet. Là, il peut y avoir des problèmes d'infrastructure. Si je n'ai pas d'Internet, je ne peux pas vendre online. Mais aussi des problèmes techniques, comment me connecter à différentes plateformes et comment présenter mon produit. Et là, pour beaucoup de PME dans les pays en voie de développement, un premier défi commence. Quel type de photo prendre, de quel angle mon produit, pas seulement pour que le produit soit joli, mais aussi pour que le consommateur sache ce qu'il achète. Et je reviens à ce problème après. Parce que nous soutenons tout à fait l'idée que Crispin et Torbjorn ont présenté, que le commerce électronique présente des opportunités incroyables pour les petites et moyennes entreprises, mais il y a des défis. Le premier, aller online. Et là, nous voyons que dans beaucoup de pays, les entreprises ont déjà des problèmes pour pouvoir se présenter sur des grandes plateformes. Ils doivent payer des frais ou ne sont pas acceptés à cause de l'origine de leur pays. Donc ça, c'est déjà une difficulté. Deuxième chose, pour pouvoir vendre, je dois pouvoir faire des transactions de paiement sur Internet et à travers les plateformes. Là, j'entre dans le monde de la finance. de transactions de différentes currencies, de différentes monnaies, mais aussi technologique. Est-ce que ma banque est connectée à une banque à l'étranger et est-ce qu'il travaille avec une plateforme? Et là, il y a des grands joueurs au niveau global qui dominent ce marché du paiement par voie électronique. Donc, je suis online, je fais le paiement. Maintenant, mon produit, si ce n'est pas un service, si c'est un bien, il doit traverser la frontière. Et il y a la logistique qui entre en jeu. Et Crispin a déjà fait référence à la Universal Postal Union, qui est une organisation qui est de plus en plus en vue. Et je pense que c'est notamment grâce au commerce électronique, parce que son système logistique et ses normes qu'il utilise ont une importance tout à fait nouvelle maintenant dans l'ère du commerce électronique. Mais là aussi, toutes les règles de comment traverser la frontière jouent un rôle, et dans ces règles-là, l'OMC a un rôle très important à jouer. Dernière étape, la relation de l'entreprise avec le consommateur. Et je reviens à cela parce que ces consommateurs, s'ils achètent online, souvent, ils ont le droit de rendre le produit. Et ça arrive de plus facilement si le consommateur n'a pas compris par la représentation sur Internet ce qu'il ou elle allait acheter. Et nous avons, dans nos enquêtes, vu que dans certains pays, jusqu'à 10% des produits sont retournés. Et nous avons aussi vu que beaucoup d'entreprises ne savent pas que cela peut arriver et qu'ils doivent rendre l'argent. Alors imaginez-vous, vous avez une petite entreprise, vous avez vendu pour une certaine somme d'argent, 10% des produits vous reviennent et vous n'avez pas calculé ça, vous n'avez pas compris qu'il y a peut-être des impôts, des tarifs qui s'appliquent dans les deux sens. Ça, une petite entreprise, elle peut faire faillite si elle n'a pas calculé ça comme il faut. Donc cette quatrième dimension est très importante et toutes les thématiques autour de la protection du consommateur entrent en jeu dans ce contexte. Cela me permet de revenir au thème de l'OMC et du consommateur, deux thèmes qui ont été soulevés avant. Une des choses que je trouve fascinantes de la discussion autour du commerce électronique à l'OMC est que pour la première fois, il y a une discussion très explicite sur la protection des consommateurs. Les textes du GATT des années 40, ils ne contiennent même pas le mot consommateur. Il est sous-entendu que le consommateur a un bénéfice du commerce, mais n'est pas explicitement mentionné. Maintenant, le rôle de la protection du consommateur, mais aussi l'organisation au niveau international. Il y a des pays qui n'ont pas de droit national, de réglementation nationale, mais est-ce qu'il y a une réglementation internationale? Je ne pense pas. Donc, toutes ces questions-là commencent à se positionner. Je trouve que c'est fascinant, mais aussi important pour les consommateurs que ce type de discussions ont lieu. Je trouve intéressant qu'ils ont lieu à l'OMC et comme Crispin Conroy au CCI, nous suivons avec beaucoup d'intérêt ces discussions et nous les soutenons là où nous pouvons être utiles.
Merci beaucoup. Voilà, je me permets de me lever pour la deuxième partie du débat. Voilà, donc on a vu que dans toutes vos interventions, l'OMC est un petit peu en filigrane, on peut le dire, en tout cas de vos préoccupations, parce que c'est un élément essentiel, évidemment, du règlement du marché. Juste pour qu'on comprenne bien, je vais résumer de façon très triviale où nous en sommes aujourd'hui avec l'OMC. Donc au début de la semaine, devait être renouvelé la nomination de 2 juges qui font partie de l'organe d'appel, donc un organe de recours sur les disputes qui sont traitées par l'OMC. Et les États-Unis en particulier se sont opposés au renouvellement de ces 2 juges. Donc il ne reste plus qu'un juge et la Cour, pour qu'elle fonctionne, doit comporter au minimum 3 personnes. Résultat, nous avons aujourd'hui un système de règlement des conflits de l'OMC qui ne fonctionne plus. Vous me corrigez si je me trompe, mais qui ne fonctionne plus. Alors, ça a évidemment un impact sur supposément un impact sur le commerce international. Ça a probablement aussi un impact sur le e-commerce. On va parler un peu de ces deux éléments. Premièrement, j'aimerais juste, chacun d'entre vous, que vous réagissiez à cette nouvelle de la semaine, qui est une nouvelle très importante. On le voit en lisant les journaux internationaux, que ça passe du Financial Times au New York Times, au Washington Post. C'est un sujet très important parce qu'on estime qu'avec cet OMC qui est aujourd'hui en quelque sorte neutralisé, c'est un organe très important qui a été mis en place au moment de la croissance, de la mondialisation, qui aujourd'hui s'arrête. Et M. Azevedo, momentanément en tout cas, et M. Azevedo, le directeur général de la CNUSED, secrétaire général de la CNUSED, dit nous revenons à la loi de la jungle. Alors, la loi de la jungle, c'est un peu inquiétant. Est-ce qu'on est vraiment à la veille d'une espèce de Far West du commerce, notamment en matière digitale? Je vous pose la question aux trois, chacun, je ne sais pas, Madame Jansen peut-être? Est-ce que ça vous inquiète, ce qui est arrivé en début de semaine, et est-ce que ça a un impact fort sur le commerce international?
Oui, cela m'inquiète. Vous avez déjà utilisé le mot « annoncé ». J'étais en train de chercher le titre de ce roman connu de Gabriel Garcia Marquez, et je pense qu'il applique à ce cas, « Chronique d'une mort annoncée ». Nous savions qu'on était en chemin vers cette situation. On le savait depuis longtemps. Normalement, l'organe d'appel a, je pense, 7 juges. Et donc, le renouvellement des juges n'a déjà pas eu lieu depuis un bon moment. Et la date finale, dysfonctionnement de l'organe de l'appel, ça a eu lieu cette semaine. Oui, je pense que ça nous attriste et moi, ça m'attriste et ça m'inquiète. Et je pense que ça devrait inquiéter le public plus large dans des pays comme la Suisse qui sont petits et qui sont connectés avec le monde. Le commerce est très important dans un pays comme la Suisse et dans la plupart des pays aujourd'hui. Si on fait du commerce entre pays, traditionnellement, la loi de la jungle a joué un rôle. Si je suis plus grand, si j'ai plus d'argent, si je peux m'imposer, je peux négocier des termes meilleurs pour tout ce que je fais. Et on pourrait peut-être dire que dans le commerce électronique, vous me direz qu'est-ce que vous pensez, nous sommes dans une loi de la jungle en ce moment où il y a des grands au niveau des plateformes des commerces. Tu as mentionné qui sont en Chine et qui sont en Amérique. Il y a des très grands au niveau des plateformes pour les paiements. Ils sont aussi en Chine, est-ce que j'ai dit Afrique? Amérique. En Chine et en Amérique. Et ils peuvent imposer leurs lois. Il y a des organismes, des entreprises qui peuvent négocier avec le ministère des Finances d'un pays au même niveau, tellement ils ont de l'importance. Il y a de plus en plus d'efforts pour régler tout ça, mais on n'y est pas encore, et c'est à cause de ça, pour partir de cette loi de la jungle, que les discussions à l'OMC sont importantes. Pourquoi? Quel est le rôle de l'organe d'appel? Si je n'ai pas de loi de jungle, j'ai besoin de règles. On a tous des règles nationales. Pour avoir des règles internationales, on doit se mettre d'accord. Ça, ce n'est pas toujours facile. Mais si les règles ne sont pas les mêmes ou ne se parlent pas, comme a dit Crispin, ça peut devenir très peu transparent, très compliqué, surtout pour les petites entreprises. Donc, on se met d'accord. Maintenant, on a une règle, on promet de jouer suivant cette règle, mais on ne s'y tient pas. Et ça, on le connaît, ça arrive. Ça arrive au football, ça arrive dans le commerce, ça arrive dans toutes les interactions humaines. Alors, la question est, est-ce qu'il y a un système pour intervenir quand quelqu'un ne se tient pas aux règles? L'OMC avait un système très sophistiqué. Sophistiqué, ça veut aussi dire que c'est compliqué, des fois complexe et compliqué pour transmettre au grand public. Et c'est peut-être là où on a péché. On n'a pas suivant l'importance de ce genre d'organe, on a un tribunal qui décide est-ce qu'un État s'est tenu aux règles ou pas. Si pas, qu'est-ce qu'on va faire? Et l'étape suivante, si il y a eu un jugement, il y a un des joueurs qui a été sanctionné, il peut faire appel. Ça, c'est l'organe d'appel. L'organe d'appel, maintenant, ne fonctionne plus. La grande question est-ce que là, ça va avoir des effets sur le tribunal? Est-ce que ça va avoir l'effet sur la négociation des règles? Pourquoi négocier les règles si je n'ai plus de système juridique qui suit?
Merci beaucoup. Monsieur Fredriksson.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to what Marion said, I think this dispute settlement mechanism is a very important part of WTO. It's, of course, an important event that I think we have seen coming. We have seen this process. It wasn't a total surprise that this happened now in this week. Because what we need more now is multilateralism. We don't need to move towards bilateral solutions in this world. This applies to many sectors, not just trade, but also trade. But we can also see that this is not stopping completely WTO's work. For instance, in the area of e-commerce, there are ongoing talks, and in other areas like Crispin was saying. And it's difficult to make progress in this area. So far in the plurilateral discussions that are going on in e-commerce, with the latest arrival of Cameroon as the most recent country to join these discussions, there are 82 countries that are participating, and only 5 from Africa. It's challenging because of what we have talked about, that the world of digital commerce, of the digital economy, is very uneven. And coming to terms with finding multilateral solution that everyone can buy into and accept and feel comfortable with is quite challenging. So it's very important that there is a forum for these kind of discussions to take place.
There is a forum, as you say, conversations, discussions, negotiations go on today.
Yes.
But if at the same time WTO has lost all its power as a jurisdictional corpus and is losing in any ways its sense, how can you still negotiate on another or related topic, different topic, with the same people? Is there any chance that these negotiations come to an end or are finalized one day? Or?
I think this is something that will have to be discussed by the member states of the WTO to see how they will deal with this current situation. And I think there are lots of stakeholders in WTO that are trying to find a way out of this now, and you're probably better equipped to respond to this situation.
Thank you. Mr. Conroy, same question to you. So what are the effects and how do you feel about the evolution of what's going on at the WTO?
Thank you. And that's a very good question, very relevant question. Is that better? Okay. So I was just saying it's a very good question, it's a very relevant question, and a very important question for business. I've heard the Director General of the WTO, Mr. Azevedo, speak on this topic, and he did say it was a blow, but I don't think that he said it was a killer blow. Certainly we don't think it is, and we certainly don't believe it'll lead us to the law of the jungle. On the contrary, I think there are many countries looking for solutions already, and alternatives have been suggested for the short term. Also, I know that there are many that are looking for medium and long-term solutions, and a lot of the concerns that were expressed about the appellate board by the American government have been long-standing and are shared by quite a few countries. So I'd prefer to see it the glass half full. We're very positive that solutions can be found, and as Torbjorn said, I think we need more multilateralism, not less, and maybe a different type of multilateralism. We were at an event yesterday, and Marion quoted Christine Lagarde on that. The WTO, I think, is sort of the major organ of the multilateral trading system, is too important for too many to fail. Our Secretary General issued a manifesto for reform at the recent WTO Public Forum. One of the issues he raised was the need to find a solution for the appellate body. But there are many other areas where the WTO can show signs of life, let's say. It needs to demonstrate that it is relevant to the 21st century. One of the ways that it's doing that is through these joint statement initiatives. So we see those joint statement initiatives as WTO reform in action. As Torbjorn mentioned, there are many states joining the e-commerce discussions. The fact that more are not joining doesn't necessarily mean that countries are against them or not wanting to participate. But as we discussed in the panel yesterday, in the WTO, one of the challenges for most of the delegations is how to cover a lot of these different topics that are going on, some of them quite complex. So, whether it's e-commerce, whether it's investment facilitation for development, whether it's the discussions on micro, small to medium-sized enterprises, whether it's domestic services regulation, these 4 topics are very relevant. Progress is being made, and we hope to see outcomes or at least signs of real progress by MC12 in June next year. So the organisation's moving. It needs to show greater signs of life, including on the fisheries subsidies negotiations, which were due to be finished this month, but now being delayed probably till MC12. So I think it needs our support, but it certainly, we see that there's constructive progress.
So I understand that you take a very positive scope on this problem.
I would say positive but pragmatic.
Pragmatic, okay. At the same time, when you really look at it, the situation seems pretty difficult. I mean, the United States are not now, have showed no intention to go back in negotiations or to give up their rules for the appeal organ. There are the two biggest commercial power are one against the other, China on one side, United States on the other. They are in a real conflict. So without those two really working and pushing forward the WTO, can you really hope to have a global system that works with global rules? I mean, is it something you can imagine? So how does it work? I don't know. Mrs. Jansen, do you have an option, a solution on that?
Yeah, maybe I try this one in English. So first, I think in this book we mentioned by Garcia Marquez in the Chronicle of a Death Foretold, what happens is that everybody knows that something is going to happen, and everybody assumes that everybody else knows that something is going to happen. I believe the person that is going to die does not know, is the only one not knowing. And because everybody thinks that everybody knows, everybody thinks somebody will do something, but ultimately nobody does anything in a situation like this. Now, I think this is not the case currently in the WTO context. It's not the case that over months we have seen all the actors just sit and wait. There has been a lot of action around the WTO in general, like with the joint initiatives, and also around the appellate bodies. So different members have made different proposals, and I believe the European Commission has presented this morning its position on how to go ahead in the current situation. Unfortunately, I did not have the opportunity to listen to this. So there are a number of members, and some are very important in terms of market size. I believe the European Union is still the biggest single market at the WTO. And also China has made proposals. So there are different proposals. There's a lot of push to keep momentum. Now, that's at the WTO. There's also a lot of dynamics outside of the WTO. We see, for instance, in Africa, a formidable push towards regional integration with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement discussion, where discussions around what kind of dispute settlement mechanism do we want for trade, for investment, is on the agenda. So these initiatives show that that theme is considered important and that members are looking for solutions in different setups. How far we can go, there are definitely the positions of the three major players, China, United States, and European Union will be terribly important. They are the ones who can hurt each other and who can hurt the others most. And at some stage, this we have seen in history, these players will realize it's better to work with each other than against each other. I think I'm not the only one on this podium who hopes that this stage will come very soon and will not take too long.
Interestingly, the digital commerce, e-commerce, has actually no rules. There are no tariffs, I think, on the commerce over the borders on the digital side. So it's amazing, actually, that there is nothing, an immaterial good go through a border, doesn't pay anything. How can you deal with that on an international level, and how can you implement rules and you start again with the same problems you had in the international commerce, subsidies, questions come up, and etc., etc. So, large question, I'm sorry for.
You know that one, you're probing me here. I think it's not quite that easy when you say that e-commerce is doing everything they want without any rules. That's not quite true, because we should just be clear on what we're talking about when we say e-commerce. For us, the key question when it comes to e-commerce is how do you order it? Let's say that you buy your clothes online from Zalando or from Amazon or any other company. That you buy the clothes, but it will have to be delivered to you. And then if it is a good, it will, if it comes from another country, it'll pass through customs. Right. So it will pay customs duties. What is special in the WTO and the moratorium that we're talking about is that countries have agreed not to impose customs duties on electronic transmissions.
Right, like music, like video,
and
films,
that's one element of e-commerce only. It's a bit difficult to really assess this market, because there's no good data really on how much that is taking place across borders. But you can see that increasingly more and more goods can be digitized, so that you can deliver, like a book you can read now on your computer or your mobile phone and so on and so forth. But there are also a lot of other trade rules that already exist in the WTO that also apply to e-commerce. So I think this is one of the key questions to discuss now in the WTO discussions on e-commerce. What needs are there for new rules, or what existing rules need to be adapted? Right. I would say that the bulk of this can be handled very much under the GATS context. But there may be certain issues that need to be addressed separately. And perhaps the most challenging issue for governments to talk about in this area is the digital data issue, the flows of data. Because data is not just something that relates to trade. It relates to human rights issues, privacy issues. For governments, it is very important for national security, for law enforcement, for industrial development, and so on and so forth. So just finding going through the trade lens to regulate data is very tricky. And it's partly for that reason that already big exemptions inside the GATS, that you are allowed to put barriers to data flows or information flows if it has a potential negative impact on the privacy of your people, on national security and other factors.
But here again, actually, the importance of having the United States included in this negotiation and this question is huge. I mean, data is a big fact, and I mean, the big players in data are Facebook,
absolutely,
Google, all American companies. So without them, how can you regulate data? I mean,
no, but you're absolutely right that, again, here is the US and China that really dominate the platforms there. There are 7 super platforms, you could say, that really dominate the picture. They account for 2/3 of the value of all the big platforms. And the fuel in this is data. Data on themselves are not very valuable. If you just have the data and you don't do anything with them, they're worth basically nothing except for the ones that they are linked to. But if you can gather them in large amounts, in big data, what we talk about, and this is exactly what these digital platforms are very good at. If you have, like Facebook, 2.4 billion users around the world in virtually all countries, they are the #1 social media platform in 90% of the world's countries. You can, for instance, offer back very attractive online advertising opportunities. And online advertising is how they monetize this data. But just collecting the data, if you don't have the capacity or the resources to transform that into what we call digital intelligence, it's very difficult to monetize it.
Right. So only the big ones will be able to monetize it.
You see, this is where the key question is now. The way we're in our digital economy report that UNCTAD released a few months ago, we see that if we just continue the trajectories that we are having right now without policy changes in a number of areas, then it's highly likely that the concentration of power and market power here will grow even further, because there are so few players that really have the global capacity to really cover everything. You take Google, they account for 90% of the world's internet searches. That's a tremendous dominance in the market, in the global market. And that makes it very difficult for any newcomer to offer a better search engine or search function, because they don't have the same information. They don't have the data that they can use to refine their algorithms. So what we stress is that, and this is again why it's difficult to just look at this through the WTO angle, because most likely you will need to look at competition issues, taxation issues, infrastructure issues, and trade issues, but also many other data issues like data privacy, data security, data flow regulations, and so on. And there are very few easy solutions that have been tried and tested.
So let's be provocative. Instead of having the United States government or administration at the table of WTO, you should have Google.
I don't think so.
And Facebook,
I'll tell you why. Even inside the United States, there are big discussions right now about the role of these digital platforms. This is one of the hot issues between the Republicans and Democrats right now in Congress. So I think it is a fundamental change we're seeing. It's not like a new way of trading only. We're seeing the next technological revolution. So basically everything is affected by the increased use of data. And that requires a very much more comprehensive approach than trying to fit everything under one trade agreement.
But listening to you, I have the impression that actually WTO is obsolete.
No, not at all.
And you should try to find another type of body to work on these questions that are very large, very new, very
No,
complex.
but just because you cannot handle everything under the Ministry of Trade doesn't mean that you don't need ministries of industry, Ministry of Economy, competition authorities, ministries of finance. It's not that it's obsolete. It's a question of, can it do everything? No. So you need to work on a number of agendas to really find a comprehensive response to what's going on right now.
One more question, and gave the audience the opportunity to ask questions. I think you mentioned the fact, or I don't remember exactly who, the fact that more and more you will have digital printers, distant printers. So actually you order somewhere in whatever in China, good that you make here through the networks. How do you deal with that? What does it mean for a company, for taxation, for where is who's getting the benefit? Do you have a tax somewhere? I mean, how do you deal with this on the relation, looking at the relation between states?
You didn't give me a chance to respond to the other questions, so
okay, yeah.
Can I respond to those briefly? First of all, I think just to pick up on a point that Torbjorn made, the WTO is certainly not obsolete, and the fact that these discussions are going on and there are so many countries involved, for me shows a great sign of dynamism in the organisation. I mentioned the manifesto that our Secretary General released in October about the WTO. I think it really demonstrates that there needs to be better cross-discussion between different organisations. So the WTO is focused on trade-related aspects of e-commerce. Other organisations in the system are working on other parts of e-commerce. It just shows that they need to talk to each other more. And that was one of the points that our Secretary General made. Whether it's e-commerce, whether it's development, whether it's human rights, whether it's climate, trade and climate, for example. So I think that's the point, not that the organisation is not working itself, but in fact, on the contrary, but we need to see greater cross-fertilisation. So that's the first point. In relation to your comment on the US and China, we're a global organisation, but I think I ought to say that from my observation, the US is, it may have its position on the appellate body, but it's very active within the WTO. Just because they have a position on the appellate body doesn't mean that they're not working very constructively on other issues. We held an event recently, for example, on the fisheries subsidies negotiations, and the American delegation was very constructive and active. And that's just one. They're also very interested in the e-commerce discussions, of course, amongst others. So I think that's the point, that the appellate body is important, but it's not. There are other things happening, and the Chinese too are very involved in the WTO and in the e-commerce discussions as well. So I think you shouldn't, just because there are these particular tensions, that doesn't mean that you
have to change the system.
What's the expression? You can't chew gum and walk too. You can do when there are a lot of things happening at the same time. In relation to the moratorium and your question about tariffs on digital transactions, I think that, as Torbjorn said, it's a very specific. The moratorium specifically on customs duties, and from our perspective, trying to create, particularly for smaller countries, a system to try and capture a tariff on, say, if you're watching for something on Netflix, data may be coming in packages from many different areas, and how do you set up a system for that, where you may be only able to capture a very small amount of money, but you've put a huge system into operation. There are different models. The Australian government has a particular model which is worth looking at. They don't try and capture the data when it comes into Australia, but they capture the funds from the organisation overseas. It's an interesting model. It's one that has been presented at the WTO. You also mentioned that, suggested perhaps if the appellate body is not functioning, then that means why bother continuing with discussions? I think on the contrary, it makes it even more important to show signs of life in other areas. My fear in the e-commerce discussions is not that they'll have some sort of blockage because of concerns about dispute settlement, but rather because of the complexity of the issues themselves, and that there are very different positions on key issues like data flows from different countries. So I think that's where we're going to really see how the negotiations will progress once they start talking about some of these really tricky issues where big players have very different positions.
Thank you. Mrs. Jansen, can you also comment on this obsolescence or not, if I understand, of the WTO? Do you think the organization is still there must be there?
I would definitely like to see the WTO to continue to be there, and I say this on an individual basis, but I'm also sure that I'm representing my agency when I say this. I'm definitely a big believer in multilateralism, because I'm not a believer in the rule of jungle. And I do indeed think that the activities we see around themes like investment, like domestic rules for services and e-commerce, they are not only important to maintain a dynamic, but they are also important to ensure that the WTO remains relevant and is ready to move along all lines and dimensions when there is again agreement on the bigger picture. as was mentioned before, digital trade, the whole digitalization issue is changing not only trade, but the way we produce and the way we consume. It's very important that these discussions are taking place at the WTO, and very interesting to see that in a period where we have big concerns like the one around the appellate body, we have concerns about irrelevance or not. Nevertheless, this organization remains at the forefront of thinking and discussions around these important and complex topics, and therefore I definitely want to see the WTO to remain relevant because it's an important institution.
Thank you, Mr. Fredriksson. Yeah.
Quickly respond to your question about 3D printing.
Yes.
And I think one should not or exaggerate this impact on trade, because first of all, in order to do the 3D print, you'll need the 3D printers. That will generate, in most countries, trade. Most likely you will buy it from somewhere, most likely from East Asia. Then in order to produce what you want to produce with your 3D print, you will need some kind of material. That will also need to be either procured locally or imported. What will be transferred is basically the software or the design electronically, digitally. And that it will fall then most likely into the category of electronic transmissions here. How big will this 3D printing phenomenon become? It's hard to predict, but so far it is mainly used for prototyping and for very specific types of manufacturing of things that you don't do many of. To believe that people in general will prefer to print everything for themselves, defining exactly how to design things and what material to use. Personally, I have my doubts. I think a lot of most people will still want to buy things that you can take from off the shelf. But you can see that this is happening in certain industries, but I don't think the big numbers will be, or big trade will be done through 3D printing in the future.
Okay, thank you very much for these precisions. Alors, est-ce qu'il y a des questions dans la salle? Monsieur, vous pouvez juste donner votre nom, je vous prête mon micro.
Johannes Schwarzer, EFTA Secretariat. I have two questions. Can I start with the first one and then?
Go with the first one.
Okay. So maybe I'll start with a question for Crispin, really. So the debate on digital trade is often cast in a light of what the benefits are for the small firms in terms of they will internationalize easier, and then even in landlocked countries they're able to reach global audiences and things like that. And then we have that fact, I think also that Torbjorn pointed out, that 90% is the big guys in terms of value added or value creation. I feel sometimes there's some friction between the two explanations, and then I was wondering, in terms of your membership, what is the part of SMEs that are represented in there, and what are their priorities in terms of digital trade rules or digital policy? Are they any different from the bigger guys? Are there specificities that I could imagine that data localization issues, all this is probably something that is more relevant for Google. Then there are certain interactions between like the platforms, and then small guys cannot sell without the platforms. But I was just wondering, are there any specific requests that you get, maybe in terms of policy formulation or advocacy for policy from SMEs, really? Thank you.
Was this question addressed to somebody in particular? Who wants to answer? Mrs. Conroy.
Thank you. It's a very good question. No, you're right. There are different interests depending on the size and also depending on the country. During the e-commerce discussions in the WTO, we've prepared a number of papers which reflect the views of our members. I'm happy to share those with you. And that reflects sort of a common view across the membership. We've also had a couple of panels on specific issues, and that has included large platforms, but also smaller and medium-sized enterprises, and they've reflected different views. And one of them included a couple of businesses from Africa, so there's also some other positions that they presented which I could share with you. Probably rather than take up time in going into detail now, I could share with you a really interesting report from the Federation of Small Businesses from the UK, which comes from the UK, but I think the sort of questions that they raise and the focuses and priorities of small businesses in the UK reflect pretty much those of members around the world. Of course, in different countries there are different challenges, and Marion and Torbjorn mentioned some of those challenges perhaps in the developing countries that are a bit different. But in terms of priorities, the ones raised in that report are pretty much reflective, and I can share that with you.
Yes, Mrs. Jansen?
I would maybe like to say something on this small business point of view, because I mentioned SME Competitiveness Outlook 2018 before, where we looked at this theme of digitalization in specifically, and we presented this report notably to our counterparts who represent SMEs at the national level. We had raised 3 themes explicitly in the report, and they were all very much welcomed by the SME representatives. One was the issue of regulation, where we took the position to say you need regulation in the areas of cybersecurity, privacy protection, and compatibility of standards. And the SMEs need this type of protection for themselves. What is important for trade, and that's, I think, where we would strongly agree with Crispin, what is a problem then if these regulations differ across the world? Then you create unnecessary costs. So you have to strike the right balance. The second point we mentioned that came up before is make big data work for small firms. It's nice to talk big data, but if the big data are only in the hands of the big companies, a few of them, then the benefits from the big data are not easily available to small players. It can even be used against them. So you need to set up systems for this. And the third point hasn't been mentioned yet today, but I consider very important, is the issue of education. Small and medium-sized enterprises do not have the time and the money to educate their staff in these new technologies. They rely on what comes out of the education system. And there I must say that in most countries, including in Europe, the education system is completely behind of what the industries need. If you get the messages for the need of the education system from experts, for instance in EPFL, who make strong calls for more teaching, learning on fields like algorithms, and you compare them what is being taught in schools, there is a huge discrepancy. I'm talking about Switzerland. Imagine what this looks like in other countries. An expert recently said to me, in my country, we have never managed to reach the education system of the 20th century. We now have to jump to the 21st one. So these are the 3 themes we emphasized, were very much welcomed. And the 4th theme came always up in the discussions, was the one of competition policy. It's the one that Torbjorn just mentioned.
Yeah, Mr. Fredriksson?
If I may also go, because I think this question of small versus big is really at the heart of this issue. And I think, again, one needs to also think about what kind of small and what kind of big are we talking about here. Mostly in traditional commerce, also big firms have had big advantages over the smaller ones. So that's normal, because you have more resources, you have bigger reach, and you can do more things. But what makes the market different from a positive side for the smaller players in digital is that you can have a much more direct access through the platforms that are there for you. And perhaps the most extreme example here is these online labor platforms like Upwork and Amazon Mechanical Turk, where actually micro companies or even individuals are able to sell their services, whatever they're good at, over a platform to anyone in the world that wants to buy that, which simply was not possible without the digital intermediation. At the same time, when we have worked together with our colleagues in the International Labour Organization, they are pointing out that, of course, with this kind of labor platform, you have many people offering to provide the services and relatively few buyers that are using many. And there is the risk there that you get a very uneven bargaining position here. So there are concerns being raised that will this lead to a race to the bottom in terms of working conditions on this platform? Will the compensation start to go down because there are so many competing for the same jobs, and so on and so forth? But when it comes to, if you think about Amazon, for instance, here, and just to illustrate the power that they get with this, they are the biggest e-commerce platform in the world. Now, being a platform owner, you set the rules for your marketplace. And then you have a large number of sellers from all around and a huge number of buyers on this. And the only entity that has knowledge about what all of these are doing is the platform owner, which in this case happens to be Amazon. So they can see what really is selling, what kind of pricing strategies seem to be working, and so on. Now Amazon enters their own brands called Amazon Basics and start competing on that marketplace against the other sellers on that marketplace. And there are a number of regulators that are now starting to think, is this really fair? Is it really appropriate that the one who sets the rules for the marketplace can also compete in that marketplace? Another example, Apple, is very important for software developers that are making apps that want to be sold. It's basically Google Play or the App Store from Apple. Every mobile app that is being sold by Apple on the App Store, Apple charges 30% commission, which is a very high commission in basically any industry. And of course, because there are only two players here in the global market, that is a very important revenue source for Apple. And it's very difficult for anyone to enter that. So that raises the competition issue and so on. So the small players can benefit from this because they couldn't do what they're doing without the platforms. But from the long-term perspective, the question is, where is most of the value ending up? That is the question of why we see such dominance of the big platforms. But it doesn't mean that the smaller players are not also benefiting, but of a different magnitude.
So listening, I just want to follow up on this because very interesting. I think when we listen to you, we have the impression that actually if you are a small business from a developing country, from a small developing countries, you have your chances to go into business. There are exceptions, but your chances to go into business are very, very low. It will be very difficult. And that during all the time needed to find the rules that will regulate that market, the bigger will even go bigger and bigger. So isn't there are we at a kind of limit where the gap is just widening all the time? No?
I wouldn't agree with that. When the chances to, if you're an SME to sell in a developing country, to sell in a rich country, they were nearly inexistent before too. And if you before would sell, you would typically do that through a retailing chain or through a brand. You would supply to somebody. So one difference of the platform is that you can sell, for instance, under your own brand. I don't know whether you have when you buy online, you often know who is selling this to you. If you buy in a big retail shop, you don't know necessarily who has produced the good. So I think the opportunities increase for SMEs. The margins, before the margins also went through the intermediaries. We have seen calculations that a jeans that you buy for 50 euro in the European Union and that is produced in China, only 5 euros stay in China. 20 euro go to the retailer. So that's what, 40% of the margin. You talk about 30% for Apple. So we see a shift in the margin. It goes to the platforms now. Is it bigger or smaller? I don't know. But the opportunities have probably increased to start selling and opportunities to make your own name, to be visible to the final customer. They have probably increased.
Okay. Do you want to add something on this?
No, just to say that I agree, and I think you mentioned in developing countries, from our membership, we hear that it does provide them, particularly small to medium-sized enterprises in developing countries, significantly more opportunities that they wouldn't have had before. Their concern is really, if there's a patchwork of regulations, that's where it's more difficult for them. But actually, the digital economy per se makes it easier for them.
Thank you. There was a question here. You can just push on the button.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for the presentations and for the rich view that you've done. Going back to the big data and the big ones and the big guys, I would like to know what is your opinion about taxation, and knowing that the OECD now has an initiative on taxation for the big companies, and of course, given that developing countries are not included, which is your opinion, and how do you think that this could impact in developing countries?
Yes, Mr. Fredriksson, Mrs. Jansen.
No, taxation is, as you say, it's a very hot topic right now globally in the discussions, and the global discussions in trying to find an appropriate response to digitalization is led by the OECD, but it's not only OECD countries participating in that. It's extended. I think there are well over 100 countries that are participating in the discussion, but it's led by the OECD countries, and it's understandable. Now, they are hoping that they will come with a solution by spring of 2020, which is just a few months away. This has been linked also to G20 discussions in this area. I think the chances are not very high that will happen, and I think there have also been attempts inside the European Union to come to an agreement with a common approach in Europe to the question of digital taxation or digital services taxes, and that has also failed. And some of the member states, some who are even represented here today, are impatient and they move forward, like France, for instance. The UK is also planning to move ahead, and there are quite a number of actually countries, both inside the OECD and beyond, that are trying to address this. And again, why is this such a sensitive issue? It's because the basis for taxation has traditionally been physical presence. If you don't have a physical presence, the country doesn't have a right to tax you. But when all the value generated from accessing data from citizens all over the world can be captured by sitting in one city, in one country, then there has been growing demands for having another way, like a virtual presence, or defining somehow that some of the value that is being created from data in my country should also be possible to tax. But the challenge is to come up with this formula that everyone will agree to exactly how to assign this value. And I think it'll take a little while before we get there.
Mrs. Jansen?
Yeah, this is, I would agree with Torbjorn, is an important issue. It goes beyond the digital taxation. At the OECD, we also discuss profit-based erosion. So we have at ITC looked in more detail at this issue in our 2017 competitiveness outlook, and there we observed one thing. We observed that for big business, if be it one of the big platforms you mentioned, or be it supply chain managers, or be it consultants advising big business, when you take a decision of where to produce, how to sell, where to invest, and where to register sales, you look at three things together: at the trade policies, the investment policies, and the tax policies. In our ministries, we tend to look at these three things separately: trade, investment, tax. Sometimes trade and investment is together. Tax is always in a separate ministry, finance. At the multilateral level, we had a strong multilateral system for trade, a non-existent multilateral system for investment, like 3,000 bilateral treaties instead, and a non-existent multilateral system for taxation. Now, you can have the view that we should have no multilateralism anywhere, or you can have the view that maybe some of the problems we as citizens have perceived with globalization, maybe due to a lack of multilateralism in these two other areas, investment and taxation. So we think that these discussions at the international level, be they on investment facilitation for development at the WTO, or be they at the OECD around taxation, are good for globalization, maybe for this new type of globalization, this new type of multilateralism.
Thank you much. So, one more question. Here. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your inputs and presentation. J'ai une question pour vous, Madame Jansen. Vous avez parlé du livre de Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Chronique d'une mort annoncée. Est-ce que, par rapport à l'OMC et à tout ce qui se passe, est-ce que vous ne craignez pas qu'au fond, cette chronique d'une mort annoncée, elle est celle qui pourrait annoncer la mort du multilatéralisme en général? Donc, tous les trois, vous avez parlé de l'importance justement d'avoir plus de multilatéralisme. Or, on voit notamment que le président Trump, sa devise pour être réélu, c'est America First et pas du tout plus de multilatéralisme. On le voit par rapport à des projets dans d'autres organisations internationales, le fait qu'on coupe des budgets dans d'autres organisations internationales. Est-ce que vous n'avez pas cette inquiétude qu'au fond le multilatéralisme est en train justement de mourir à petit feu? Merci.
Oui, je serais d'accord que les soucis concernant le multilatéralisme ne se limitent pas à un possible souci autour de l'OMC. Je pense qu'il y a d'autres organisations à Genève aussi qui ont senti un certain soutien qui s'est affaibli, peut-être. Il y a la tension qu'il y a eu sur la UPU récemment. À New York, on le sent. Donc, oui, il y a ce souci. Il y a d'autres, même des soucis peut-être autour de la démocratie. Moi, j'ai noté dans une publication que nous avons fait récemment qui s'appelle Women Shaping Global Economic Governance, que le mot confiance, trust, manque de confiance dans la globalisation, mais aussi manque de confiance dans les démocraties apparaît. Et ça, ce n'était pas le cas il y a 10 ans. On ne se posait pas ces questions. Donc, je pense que ça vaut la peine de se poser ces questions, et ceux de nous qui croient au multilatéralisme, à la collaboration, à l'internationalisation et à la démocratie, de chacun de nous penser qu'est-ce que nous pouvons faire. Et au Centre du commerce international, nous ne réfléchissons pas seulement, nous agissons pour renforcer ces systèmes dans lesquels nous croyons.
Other comments?
No. Can take this.
Okay, so I think from our perspective, just to add to this importance of multilateralism, but also not just multilateral. That's of course. I mean, being the UN, we would definitely favor multilateralism here, because we think that is the best way to protect the weakest in the system. But it's not only that. We, inside the system, also need to become much better at working together. I say that in the case of e-commerce, ever since the World Summit on the Information Society, which had its first summit here in Geneva, we have had ITU leading like the overall ICT work. But in the case of e-commerce and trade, it has been UNCTAD, ITC, and the Universal Postal Union that have worked together as a team. Now that's not enough. So now we have something called the E-Trade for All since 2016, which has 30 partners and many other partners here in Geneva, such as the Economic Commission for Europe, WIPO, WTO, the Enhanced Integrated Framework, ITU, CATS, South Center, Diplo Foundation, and so on and so forth, UNCTAD, ITC, of course, core members. We need to do a much better work in cutting silos and making our work more efficient in supporting developing countries. And the governments need to do the same. They cannot just do siloed work ministry by ministry, exactly like Marion was saying. The ministries need to come together, and the ministries and the government need to be better at interacting with the private sector, civil society, and others. And this is very challenging, but I think this is really fundamentally important to deal with what we're now seeing, how digitalization is disrupting old practices. We cannot just deal with the infrastructure of ICT. In Rwanda, they have perfect 4G mobile coverage now, but only 1% of the population are buying online. So it takes more than that, and that requires this connecting the dots across sectors and also across organizations and ministries.
Thank you very much. One more question? Yes, comment?
No, I think that certainly there are challenges to our current multilateral system, but that doesn't mean that it's dying. I think it's being challenged. But people are reacting. You've mentioned one particular person, but that's a particular person. I think that there are many in the system globally who are fighting for multilateralism and a different sort of multilateralism. So I think that the only way we are going to resolve the global challenges is through more multilateralism, and that is, I think, obvious to all those who are actually working within the system and many people globally. Doesn't mean there aren't challenges, but I think it's the only way forward.
Who should take the lead in this promotion of the multilateralism? When you take the lead to stop the multilateralism, it's pretty easy. One large state can take the lead and implement its trend. But who is really and who has really to push, and how can it do it today, push in favor of multilateralism? The state.
I think all of us have to take that, carry the torch for that. International organizations, the member states, civil societies, business. I think you're right. I mean, in most countries, I think there is a preference for multilateral solutions here, but in not all, perhaps, especially not now. There's not one organization or one individual state that can just take this role.
Mrs. Jansen,
I would go further with everyone. I think this is a period where each individual has to ask his or herself, what do I want and what can I do? And in many countries on our continent, you do this notably through the way you vote. And to the way you act in your civil society. What we, I think, as institutions have to do is to be better in communicating to the individuals, to reach out to this individual level, also in a language that is understood, so that we do not only talk about benefits and multilateralism, but are able to convey what this means. And this is an area we are actively working on at ITC, and it's maybe easier for us because of our direct interaction with the smaller players, with the smaller firms, that helps us to understand what is on their mind and what we can do also to make them benefit from multilateralism and from globalization.
Thank you very much. I guess we are here at the end. It was a perfect conclusion to this session. I thank you, ladies, gentlemen, for the very interesting conversation. We can see that the problems are real complex and need a lot of partners, a lot of actors to be solved today. And I also registered that you are a little bit, what's the right word, afraid of what's going on with WTO, but at the same time, you're still positive and supporting multilateralism, absolutely. Thank you very much and have a nice afternoon.
Have to get it started.